For over 32 years, Halloween Horror Nights has made a name for itself by bringing nightmares to life through extremely creative stories and highly themed environments. However, there's so much detail that a lot can be missed even if you run a house a bunch of times. Enter the Unmasking the Horror Tour, a daytime lights-on guided tour in which you can take your time exploring all the rich details of a select number of haunted houses and even come out with a few photos. About a year ago, I made a video on this tour actually as my first ever HHM video, and I loved it so much that I wanted to do it again. So with this video, we're going to take the 3-house Unmasking the Horror Tour and dive into 3 of the haunted houses at HHN 32, The Last of Us, The Darkest Deal, and Dr. Oddfellow's Twisted Origins, for a lights-on look, some fun facts, Easter eggs, and even bits of additional lore perhaps. Now just to note, this is a photos only tour, and only certain areas could be photographed per Universal's rules. And just another forewarning, this video will contain some gore as well as spoilers for the houses, but at this point there's not much to spoil. I'm going to leave a more in-depth description of the terms of the Unmasking the Horror Tour down in the description below, but we got a lot to dive into, so let's waste no more time and get into this incredible tour. Alright, so we begin our tour with the house I'm admittedly the least familiar with out of the 3, and that is The Last of Us. While I did enjoy it, it wasn't really my favorite of the houses this year, but getting to do this tour with the lights on and getting to see the immaculate set work got me to appreciate this house a whole lot more. The only thing though about this is that we couldn't really take that many pictures inside of this house, which I get it, it's a third-party IP, so totally cool. But we did get to take a few pictures in a few of the big show-stopping moments near the second half of the house, and the first one of those moments was this giant sort of town square set piece with this crashed police car. We have this really cool picture of this sort of film festival sign, and I bring this up to talk about the fact that all of the signage here is directly pulled from the game. Naughty Dog did provide Universal with some great assets to bring the world to life and to really put you in the feel of the game and of the Pittsburgh section of that game specifically, so I just think this is one of the many great examples of that throughout this haunted house. There's a lot of foliage and vines all around this house to sort of create that overgrown, rundown atmosphere, and they mention that the team that inserts all of these in all the haunted houses, but specifically this one, is only comprised of 8 people. Now over the past few years, the Halloween Horror Nights team has inserted animals into all of the haunted houses, just as little Easter eggs for fans to look out for. Last year, for example, it was a spider, so there was a spider in every one of the haunted house, hidden in unique and exciting ways. And this year it's a frog, so of course we see this little frog here on a barrel, really small, it's super hard to see. Right here on the left side of this large scale set piece, we have a really cool mirror scare, so of course you can see me in the reflection there, but a scare actor can actually come out from behind the mirror and get you that great scare. There are a lot of great mirror scares in this house, and mirror scares are kind of a staple of Halloween Horror Nights now, so this is just one of the many great examples of a great mirror scare found in The Last of Us. And as you can see, I'm sort of flashing some of the graffiti on the screen, and that is another example of sort of bringing these sets from the video game to life. So I talked about sort of the print assets that are used in this house, but also the graffiti, the buildings, everything that exists in that Pittsburgh section of the video game is brought to life in this haunted house, which I think is really great. It's really great attention to detail. Halloween Horror Nights generally does a pretty great job with adapting these IP locations and bringing them to life, but I think this is a really great example of that, just shown by little things like the graffiti on the walls, for example. Of course, the car-shaped elephant in the room is this police car that kind of acts as the centerpiece of this scene. And if you're a longtime fan of Halloween Horror Nights, you might recognize this police car specifically, as it was used both in the last video game IP house, Resident Evil Welcome to Raccoon City at HHN 23, as well as the Psycho Scarapy Scare Zone at HHN 25. As you would turn past the cop car, you'd see more graffiti on the walls, and you would come to sort of the next hallway scene, which would have this wall that says "Death for Freedom." Of course, like I said, continuing the story found within the game, and a hunter would come out here and do a quick little scare. Over here, I also saw this great "Thank you for not littering" sign, which I recognize from doing the Descendants of Destruction tour last year. The next scene is sort of the transition before you go into the sewer, and we couldn't actually take photos inside the sewer, but this is a nice little transition moment. We have this really cool battery that I do also remember from Descendants of Destruction, this Megalodon Shock, which sounds like Megalodon Shark, which also ties into the J90, the opening of Jaws the Ride. There's usually some kind of Jaws reference in these haunted houses, or just classic Universal references in general. And if you look a little closer on the smaller numbers on the battery, of course we have J90, the opening of Jaws the Ride, U75, which I also believe is a tie to Jaws, the year 1975, which is the release of the movie. And then if you go all the way to the bottom, we have WJWS13, which is the news station found in the Jaws ride, the queue, which showed all of these sort of Amity Island happenings as you waited in line for that classic attraction. And here you can get a little peek into the sewer. We couldn't take any pictures of the sewer itself, but you get a little peek from the sewer door. And here's just sort of a look back to show sort of the entrances and the boo holes where the characters will come out. On the left is the one for the hunters, and on the right is the one for the stalker. And then the final set piece that we really could photograph was the big neighborhood sort of climax scene. And you see that house where Joel comes out of the second story wielding his pistol. This is a really great set piece. This house does really well with those large scale set pieces. I feel like this is one of those houses, as far as IPs go specifically, that really uses the large scale set pieces. Right here you could see sort of the corner where the big bloater pops out. This is one of 2 bloater moments, and I really love seeing that because we don't get to really see the infected interact with these big set pieces. A lot of it is inside the sewers and inside tight tunnels, so getting to see a creature as big as the bloater really interact with these set pieces is really fun. There is a really sad Easter egg right here. If you can make out, there is a golf club positioned here, and that was meant to be a direct nod to the events of The Last of Us Part 2. I'm not going to spoil specifically what the golf club means, but it does have a huge impact to the story of that game. So if you know it, you know. If you don't, go play Last of Us 2. As you come a little closer to that house where Joel pops out of the window, you get to see above the door frame, there's the number 32. That is going to be a trend that you're going to see in all of the haunted houses this year. Like the animals, like the frogs, they like to insert numbers for the year of Halloween Horror Nights. So here is 32 for Halloween Horror Nights 32. And yeah, I was just completely floored by this final scene in the house with show lights on, with just the house lights on. I think it looks absolutely fantastic, and I think it's a great encapsulation of what works in this house when it comes to the scenery. You have a lot of that great foliage design, you have these large scale set pieces. I think this really works, and like I said, this tour really made me appreciate The Last of Us house a lot more than I did before, which is the point of taking a tour like this. But after that, we move to the Darkest Deal, which is one of my absolute favorite haunted houses this year. This and Dr. Oddfellow's Twisted Origins were the reasons I wanted to take this tour. Last of Us is great, but this house is even greater. I absolutely love the set design and the scenery in this house, and that begins with the facade, as we see sort of the barrel house exterior, sort of setting up the story of Pine Straw Spruce that we heard in the podcast, where he's sort of talking to the bartender, talking about his troubles with music before the collector shows up to take his soul. This tour is the only way you can get really up close with the facade, because the queue is on a second level before you actually walk up to the door, but we actually got to walk right up in front of the facade of the barrel house, which I think is super awesome. Once Pine Straw Spruce has gotten his incredible musical ability, he's up here performing on stage, and these sort of demon creatures are watching and taking in the music. And I kind of had a question about this. I was like, wait, if he's famous, who are these characters? Why are they here? And the tour guide kind of confirmed that this is the presence of the collector. So having these demon characters sort of watching Pine Straw's every move acts like a surrogate for the collector himself to monitor Pine Straw and make sure he's upholding his end of the deal, which I thought was really incredible. A great story detail that, again, you're not going to really get when you're doing the house at night. I really loved getting up close and personal with these demon creatures. I think they're absolutely crazy looking. I think the creature design in this house is some of the best in any of the houses this year, period. Right off to the right hand side, we have a clock on the wall set to 10:31, which is an obvious reference to Halloween. And while I won't show it out of respect for Universal that said no pictures of the instruments, but I really like the detail that above Pine Straw on the stage here is the guitar of Roberto Fuentes, El Brujo, from the podcast, who is sort of the previous victim of the collector that we will see later on in the house, actually. Also in the bar, we have pictures of people playing instruments, which is going to foreshadow some of the scares we're going to see in the mausoleum scene that's coming up right after this. And speaking of the mausoleum scene, let's talk about these graves. All of these graves are fictional people, but if you look at the dates, all of them were aged 27 years old, which is a deep cut reference to the 27 Club, which stands for this group of musicians who tragically passed away when they were 27 years old. Musicians like Jim Morrison, Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix, and Robert Johnson, whose story we've talked about on this channel before as being a piece of inspiration for The Darkest Deal. I did mention that these characters were fictional, but we do have a few familiar names amongst the gravestones here. Of course, one of them being Roberto Fuentes, El Brujo, who was the character I mentioned earlier from the podcast. Then we also have a grave for Laura Lynn Souls, a reference to Laura Sauls, who is one of the main creatives behind Halloween Horror Nights. And in this mausoleum scene, we have one of the best double scares in the entire house. We have Tommy Parker, who I assume is this saxophone player, coming out from behind the grave, and then also this sort of spirit form coming from the other side. It really, really gets you. And that takes us directly to the next scene, which is Pine Straw Spruce's family home. This is the scene where we see the collector possess his mother, which is, I think, one of the more heartbreaking moments of this haunted house. Here we, of course, have the inside of the cabin itself with lots of just sort of scattered oddities, scattered possessions. We got couches, we got shelves, and then, of course, we have the pot scene, which is where Pine Straw's mother actually stands in this scene. The next set piece we have is sort of this town square where we see another sort of demon fan of Pine Straw Spruce coming out before we actually see the collector himself, where he says, you know, it's everything you wanted right this way, as you go into the Barrel House Blues. But let's talk about this set piece. I love how open it is, and I love how they create this sort of town square open set in a sprung tent. I have to remind you, this house is all inside of a sprung tent, so I think this is a really, really great use of the space here, and also just building the atmosphere, really bringing the Mississippi Delta to life. Now, we couldn't take any pictures of the scene where the collector finally grabs Pine Straw's soul. We did get to take pictures inside of the collector's realm, sort of the hellish realm that you end the house with, and we get the final form of Pine Straw Spruce himself here on the wall. And it's something you might not be able to see at night. There are actually heads mounted into the wall, sort of like screaming for help as they're trapped in the collector's realm, immortalized forever. The Darkest Deal is one of my favorite houses for this entire year. I think it is one of the best stories that has been told at Halloween Horror Nights in quite a while. But the final house we did on this tour was my favorite. This is probably my favorite house of this year, I would say. Dr. Oddfellow's Twisted Origins. Lots of great detail found in this facade. Of course, we have the Oddfellows Grand Circus and Exposition sign with the zodiac signs lining the pillar and the curtains as you walk through it, as well as you have this fenced with a lot of great graphics, of course, and a wanted poster for Walter Nicholson. I'm not too sure who this character is. Is this a new character? Is this someone we know? I don't really know. It wasn't really talked about. But of course, a character that is well known, especially in relation to Dr. Oddfellow in this house, is Jack Schmidt, who has a wanted poster in this facade. And in general, with this facade, we have just lots of scattered props around and really just creating that dingy carnival atmosphere that makes this house stand out. It doesn't have to be pretty for the guests because we are really not supposed to be there. We're going through the back door to the special nighttime performance of this carnival, and the clowns, well, they're not actually clowns. They're out to murder you. So that story begins to be told not only through this facade, but as you walk through the door into the tent of Dr. Oddfellow's Grand Circus. We have this poster for Dorothy Richmond. Now, I did mention in the past that this could be Chance. That theory was talked about by the tour guide and they said no. Lots of great detail as you walk sort of this tunnel into the house itself. You have a lot of these, you know, crates, signage around here, and sort of tying to that backstage atmosphere, you actually travel underneath the bleachers where, you know, guests would normally sit and watch the show. You're going underneath the bleachers, kind of already tipping you off that this is not really a great place to be. You don't really want to be here. You really shouldn't be here, and you're going to pay for being here. And as you're sort of walking into this circus, you're seeing the silhouettes of clowns projected on the wall on your right hand side, and one of those clowns bears a striking resemblance to, of course, Jack the Clown. This is one of a few Jack references we have in this house, and while he's not officially seen as like a character in this house, they do a lot of great work with projections to bring Jack to life here. As you funnel into this next hallway, on the left hand side you could see a bumper car that was used in the Killer Carnies area of HHN 17, which is another cool little nod. And here you can also see a head that will be quite familiar if you enjoyed the Dollhouse of the Damned house back at HHN 24, because this is the same one from that house. And then the next room, you come face to face with Dr. Oddfellow as he stands on this stage with two sort of half human, half beast, as he describes them, figures next to him. I mentioned the Zodiac as we walked into the facade, and a lot of the mutilated performers do resemble characters and sort of the iconography of the Zodiac signs themselves. So here it seems like these characters might be resembling the Aries sign. I'm not too sure exactly. These are just kind of my interpretations. This wasn't like talked about by the tour guide or anything. This is just my sort of guess. And a little detail I thought was pretty cool is, you know, you're focused on Dr. Oddfellow in front of you, but above you there's actually a sign that says Dr. Oddfellow. You can't really see it in the house, or at least I didn't really notice it in the house during the nighttime. So it was really cool to see that sort of little detail. Now the next room that we could take a lot of photos in was the menagerie area, which has this really great lion scare, which is a callback to HHN 29 and Nightingale's Blood Pit, if you remember that house. I couldn't take pictures of the lion itself, but if you've been through the house or you've been through Nightingale's, you know what I'm talking about with that lion. You can't really miss him. But here we have our third frog on one of the cages with a little top hat, which I think is really cute. As you pass through the menagerie, you enter sort of this area where we see Dr. Oddfellow's carriage here. You see this decapitated zebra head, which paired with the lion sort of resembles, I guess, the Leo sign, because that's, you know, Leo's a lion. And we have lots of great props and signage scattered about, but I want to talk about this giant clown head that you walk through. And if this thing looks a little bit uncanny, a little bit familiar, a little bit not, this is very similar to the facade used for Dr. Oddfellow's original house back at HHN 10, the Fear House. It's not exactly the same, but it does look quite similar to that Fear House facade. But it's not just Oddfellow Easter eggs we get in here, my friends. Oh no, we actually get to see a couple nods to Jack, including this quite obvious representation of Jack's box. I really love that they inserted this in here. Jack's box is such an important part of Halloween Horror Nights history. It's such an unforgettable artifact. However, there's another little callback to Jack and his story. Right as you actually walk through that clown head, you see the cane that Jack used back at HHN 17. So of course, as you see Dr. Oddfellow earlier, he's wearing the coat that Jack takes from him at Halloween Horror Nights 17. Well, this is the cane. So I think this is a really cool little nod to that story, to Jack, in this Easter egg room. I think this is like the big Easter egg room. And this is before we even get to the point where we see Oddfellow stuff Jack in the box. Now there was one more room that we got to take photos in, and that was the final room, which was really, really cool. I was really happy we could take some photos in Oddfellow's caravan. Something that immediately caught my attention as it pertains to lore is Oddfellow's notebooks that are sitting on this desk right here. It's hard to read them just because of the handwriting and how small it is, but you do see some of his writings from the Jungle of Doom, which is one of the scare zones for this year. You see Dr. Oddfellow's symbol as well as the runes and the runic language that we have. So we have like a little translator at the bottom for those runes. Something I think is really cool because there's like runic messages on the letters on the wall as well. And as you can see, it looks like Oddfellow's like perfecting his symbol in this notebook. I think there's a lot to break down here in this notebook, and maybe I'll do that in some other video, but I think this is a really, really cool detail, just to look at all the little Easter eggs and little nods in this notebook, something that I hope we get to see more of once we learn more about Dr. Oddfellow in the future, perhaps. But yeah, I love how big and open the set piece is. Of course, you have Dr. Oddfellow standing center stage on top of a trunk, which I believe is the trunk that's holding Jack's body at this point, which is absolutely crazy to think about in the context of this haunted house. And one more Easter egg you kind of see here is you see different body parts from Billy the doll, who is the doll featured in the Dead Silence house many years ago. This is a character they try to insert in a haunted house every single year. And of course, Oddfellow's, Twisted Circus is definitely the perfect place for Billy to go. Overall, I loved getting to see Dr. Oddfellow's Twisted origins up close and personal, getting to see all the Easter eggs, getting to learn more about the story. I think that this tour made me love this house so much more than I already do. And like I said, it's my favorite house of this year. So really enjoyed getting to see Dr. Oddfellow's Twisted Origins, and as well as the other houses on this tour. In comparison to the 6-house tour I took last year, this was definitely a lot less daunting. You don't get as much bang for your buck, I'd say, but if you're looking for more of an entry-level experience, or you're particularly interested in any of the 3 houses on this tour like I was, I'd recommend this one. Regardless of how many houses we go through though, I love this tour. It is so informative, especially for someone like me who loves HHN lore, HHN history, Easter eggs, and stuff like that. I ate it all up, if I'm being honest. And it's also fun for someone who loves to capture and document Halloween Horror Nights, because this is really the only way to do so if you're not like invited as media. Like I said, in the video, you can't take pictures of everything, but I got to take a lot of photos. I think I had like over 400 photos that I took on this tour. So obviously I had fun, but I hope you had fun watching this video. Let me know in the comments what your favorite Easter egg or little detail was. I just love to know what you all think, what really stood out to you. For me, it's got to be Oddfellow's notebook. I think that's just so incredible. There's so much to dive into. Should I dive into it? Should I dive into that for another video? Again, let me know in the comments below. And if you did enjoy this video, like HHN and theme park deep dives, history, and more, I'd really appreciate if you dropped a like on the video and subscribe to the channel. We're really nearing 2,000 subscribers, which is absolutely insane, so I want to thank you all for the support recently. I truly appreciate it. As this video is being published, I'm actually on my 6-house tour right now. Yes, you heard it here, that's the next video. I am also doing a 6-house tour, but of course you'll just have to wait and see what that's all about. I want to thank you all for watching this video once again, and I'll see y'all in the next one. Take care, everybody.